The lamp by the Ganges. In the old city of Varanasi, where temple bells rang before sunrise and the Ganges carried both prayers and silence, there lived a boy named Arav. He was 17 and worked in his father's small flower shop near the Ghats. Every morning, before the streets filled with pilgrims and holy men, Arav would help string marigolds into garlands, arrange lotus flowers in brass bowls, and light the first incense sticks of the day. The city woke early. Women in bright saris carried baskets of offerings. Boatmen called softly from the riverbank. Priests in saffron robes walked through the morning mist. And above everything floated the sound of chanting, as old as the river itself. Arav had grown up among these things, yet he often felt like a stranger in his own life. His father loved the shop and expected Arav to take it over one day. A family business is not just work, he always said. It is trust passed from one generation to the next. But Arav was not sure that was the life he wanted. At night, after the shop closed, he would sit on the roof of their house with a notebook and write stories, thoughts, scraps of conversations he had heard in the market, descriptions of faces he saw by the river. He wrote about everything, but told no one. He knew his father would not understand. Writing, to his father, was a hobby. Flowers were real. Business was real. Rent was real. Dreams were beautiful, but beauty did not feed a family. One evening during Dev Deepawali, the Ghats were more crowded than Arav had ever seen them. Thousands of tiny oil lamps had been placed along the steps by the river, turning the banks of the Ganges into lines of fire. Music drifted through the air. Priests performed arti with great flaming lamps, and the river reflected gold, orange, and red like moving light. Arav stood at the edge of the crowd holding a basket of diyas for sale. "Bia, one lamp please," said a voice beside him. He turned and saw an old woman wrapped in a simple white shawl. Her hair was silver, and her face was deeply lined, but her eyes were bright and steady. He handed her a diya. She looked at the basket, then at him. "You are somewhere else," she said. Arav frowned. "What do you mean?" "Your hands are here," she replied, placing a coin in his palm. "But your mind is not." He gave a small awkward smile. "Is it that obvious?" To old people, everything is obvious. That made him laugh. The old woman bent slightly and lit her lamp from a nearby flame. But instead of placing it in the river at once, she held it carefully in both hands. "What would you ask the river for?" she said. Arav shrugged. "I don't know." "That means you know, but you are afraid to say it." He looked at her more closely. "Do you always talk like this?" "Only when I meet someone carrying too much silence." The crowd moved around them, busy and bright, but for some reason Arav stayed where he was. "I want to leave," he said at last. The woman nodded as if she had expected this. "I want to write," he continued. "Not just at night. Not secretly. I want to go to Delhi or Mumbai, study literature, maybe become a real writer someday." "And what stops you?" "My father." "Does he forbid it?" Arav hesitated. "Not exactly. I've never told him." The woman smiled faintly. "Ah. So the prison has no lock." He looked away toward the river, embarrassed. "It is not so easy," he said. "My father built this shop from nothing. He worked his whole life. My mother died when I was young. It has always been the two of us. If I leave, who will help him?" The old woman listened quietly. "And what if I fail?" Arav added. "What if I leave everything behind and discover I'm not even good enough?" The old woman finally placed her lamp into the Ganges. It floated away gently, a small flame among thousands of others. "When my husband was alive," she said, "he wanted to become a classical singer." Arav glanced at her. He had a beautiful voice. But his father owned a textile shop, and in those days sons did not argue much. So he stayed. He married. He worked. He was kind, responsible, respected. She watched the river. Was he unhappy? Arav asked. Not exactly, she said. But there was a room inside him that remained closed his entire life. The words settled heavily between them. After he died, I found old notebooks filled with songs he had written but never sung in public. I still have them. Sometimes I think a quiet regret can live longer than a loud mistake. Arav said nothing. Temple bells began ringing again somewhere behind them. The old woman turned to him. If you speak honestly to your father and still choose duty, that is one thing. But if you never speak at all, then you are not choosing duty. You are choosing fear. Before Arav could answer, the crowd shifted and a group of pilgrims passed between them. By the time he stepped around them, the old woman was gone. He looked up and down the ghat, but there was no sign of her. Only lamps. Music. Voices. The endless river. That night Arav could not sleep. He lay awake listening to the distant barking of dogs, the turning of ceiling fans, the occasional sound of a late boat moving through the dark water. Again and again he heard the old woman's words. The prison has no lock. The next morning he opened the flower shop as usual. He arranged marigolds, counted loose coins, and handed roses to early customers. His father moved around the stall with practiced efficiency, barely speaking except to discuss prices. By afternoon, Arav felt his courage fading. Maybe this was foolish. Maybe he should wait. Maybe next month. Maybe next year. But when evening came and the sky turned copper over the river, he said, "Papa, can we talk after dinner?" His father looked up immediately. There was something in Arav's voice that made him nod. That night they sat in the courtyard of their small home. A neem tree stood in one corner, and a single lantern burned between them. For a while neither spoke. Then Arav took a breath and told him everything. About the notebook. About the stories. About wanting to study. About feeling ashamed for wanting something different. About being afraid to disappoint him. His father listened without interrupting. That frightened Arav even more. When he had finished, the courtyard was silent except for the sound of a pressure cooker whistling faintly from a neighboring house. At last his father said, "How long have you felt this way?" "Years." His father lowered his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Arav gave a bitter smile. "I thought you would be angry." His father leaned back slowly. "When I was your age," he said, "I wanted to be a schoolteacher." Arav stared at him. His father almost smiled. "You look surprised." "You never said that." There are many things fathers do not say. The lantern flame moved in the warm night air. "My own father fell sick," he continued. "The shop became my responsibility. Later, it became habit. Then life. I do not regret feeding my family. But regret and love can sit in the same heart." Arav felt something tighten in his chest. His father looked directly at him now. "I pushed you toward the shop because I thought stability was the safest gift I could offer. Perhaps I forgot that safety is not the same as happiness." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally Arav said quietly, "Are you angry?" His father shook his head. "I am only sad that my son was afraid of me." Arav looked down. Then his father asked, "Do you truly want this?" "Yes." "Enough to work harder than you have ever worked here?" "Yes." "Enough to fail, begin again, and continue?" Arav swallowed. "I think so." His father gave a short nod. "Then we will find a way." Arav looked up so quickly that his chair nearly scraped backward. What? His father's expression remained serious, but there was softness in it now. You will apply. If you are accepted, you will go. Until then, you will help at the shop and prepare properly. Dreams also require discipline. Arav could barely speak. You mean it? I do, his father said. But promise me one thing. Anything. Do not leave this city ashamed of it. If you become a writer, remember where your stories began. For the first time in years, Arav felt the future open instead of close. Months passed. He studied at dawn, worked in the shop by day, and wrote late into the night. He sent applications to universities in Delhi. He was rejected by one. Then another. But the third sent back a letter of acceptance. The day it arrived, his father read it twice before handing it over. Well, he said, hiding emotion badly, it seems we must buy you a suitcase. Arav laughed and cried at the same time. On his last evening before leaving Varanasi, he went alone to the Ghats. The sun had nearly set. Boats drifted across the river. The water was bronze and blue. Priests were preparing for the evening arti. Arav carried a single diya in his hand. He knelt by the water and lit it. For a moment he thought of his mother, whose face he remembered only in fragments. Then of his father, who had loved him sternly and imperfectly and bravely. Then of the old woman in white, whoever she had been. He placed the lamp into the river. It floated outward, small but steady. As he watched it go, a voice beside him said, "So. You found the key." Arav turned sharply. The old woman stood there again, as calm as if no time had passed at all. "I looked for you that night," he said. She smiled. People usually only find what they are ready to hear, not who they are ready to meet. He laughed softly. "I'm leaving tomorrow." "I know." "My father said yes." "I know that too." Arav shook his head. "Who are you?" The old woman looked toward the river. Someone who once stayed too long in silence. He wanted to ask more, but the first notes of the evening prayers began to rise, filling the air with sound. When he looked back at her, her eyes were on the floating diya. "Remember," she said, "a river moves forward not because it forgets its source, but because it carries it." Then she walked away into the gathering crowd. This time Arav did not follow. He understood that some people enter your life not to remain, but to open a door. Years later, after he had published stories and novels of his own, interviewers would ask Arav where his writing began. Some expected him to mention a university, a famous teacher, or a book that changed his life. But he always answered the same way. It began in a flower shop by the Ganges, in a city that taught me that devotion is not only prayer. Sometimes devotion is having the courage to become what is already quietly burning inside you. And on certain evenings, when he returned to Varanasi and stood by the river at sunset, he still set a small lamp upon the water. Not to ask for anything. Only to remember that the bravest journeys often begin with a conversation we are afraid to have.